Sally that girl in the kitchen. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sally that girl in the kitchen. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to make Turkish baklava 2 ways in 1 tray. Yes. So what do I mean by that? Well, some people love walnut baklava, others prefer pistachio. So I'm going to teach you how to make both, and we're just going to use 1 tray, half walnut, half pistachio. So that way, no matter what team you're on, you'll be satisfied. You will be able to provide both walnut and pistachio baklava, both absolutely delicious, and we're going to make them together in 1 tray. How easy does that sound? So what makes Turkish baklava special or different from other baklavas? Well, Turkish baklava is made with a syrup that is put together very easily with just water, sugar, and some lemon. That's it. There's no cinnamon, there's no other flavors added. And really what it does is it lets those nuts really shine through. The buttery phyllo, the delicious nuts, and that syrup really make this baklava ridiculously good. So I'm super excited to teach you how to make it. Let's not wait another second and let's get started. For the syrup part of today's recipe, you will need 2 cups of sugar, 1 cup of water, the juice of half a lemon, and 2 pieces of lemon peel. For the baklava, you will need 2 sticks of unsalted butter, 2 cups of finely chopped pistachios with a 1/4 teaspoon of salt added to them if they are unsalted, 2 cups of finely chopped walnuts with a 1/4 teaspoon of salt added to them if they are unsalted, 4 tablespoons of sugar, separate, 2 and 2, and 1 16-ounce package of thawed phyllo dough sheets, but you'll only be using half of the package. I will also note that if you're not using unsalted butter and you're using salted butter, then just omit the salt. You will also need a 9x13 glass Pyrex or a similarly sized tray. I like this Pyrex because my phyllo sheets fit almost perfectly in this tray and I don't have to trim them. You'll also need a just washed, very clean kitchen towel, some plastic wrap, some measuring spoons, some dry measuring cups, a wet measuring cup, a microwave-safe bowl and a pastry brush, a couple of bowls and spoons for your nuts, a small bowl for your lemon juice, and of course a knife, and you'll need a food processor and some oven mitts. You will also need some aluminum foil, and you'll need a medium-sized pot and a serving spoon or your favorite stirring utensil. It is important to note that if you purchase phyllo dough such as this one that comes frozen, you should take the box out of the freezer and put it into your refrigerator the night before you intend to make your Turkish baklava, because that way it will slowly thaw in the box overnight and it will be ready for you in the morning. Now this particular package comes with 2 rolls and you'll only need to use one of them for this recipe. So you can choose to leave one in the freezer and only thaw one of them in the refrigerator overnight. Or in my case, I've thawed both of them because I don't mind having the extra sheets of phyllo dough when I'm done, because that just inspires me to make other yummy things with my delicious phyllo dough, such as my bulemas de papa y queso or my spinach and cheese bulemas that I can also make using phyllo dough instead of homemade dough. There's just so many things that I love to make with this dough, so I'm going to be thawing both rolls, but you can choose to thaw one as you'll only need one for this recipe. So the key here is to pull the roll out of the refrigerator 1 hour before you're ready to layer your baklava to let it come to room temperature. So I will show you what to do to keep it from drying out soon, but just make sure to pull it out 1 hour before you're ready to layer your baklava. And don't unwrap it for now. Just let it sit on your counter wrapped up as it is. So now that we have all of our ingredients and tools together, let's get started. The first thing we're going to want to do is prepare our delicious syrup. So for that, we need our sugar, our water, and half of a lemon. And the first thing you're going to want to do is squeeze the lemon juice into a bowl, and then just grab your lemon, and I just do this right over my pot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off a couple of pieces of that lemon peel from that delicious lemon that I just squeezed, and I'm going to add them right into the pot. The lemon peel just helps really give an incredible flavor to this delicious syrup for our Turkish baklava. It really just adds an extra layer, an extra dimension of flavor to our syrup. So right on top of that, you're just going to add your sugar, and then you are going to add that delicious lemon juice that we have just squeezed out. Remember, we're using half a large lemon. And then right on top of that, you're going to add your water. You will be surprised at just how aromatic and delicious this syrup is. As I said earlier, Turkish baklava does not use cinnamon or honey or any other ingredient in the syrup. But you will not believe just how amazing and thick this syrup becomes with just these simple ingredients. And this little tip of adding the lemon peel that I learned from my grandmother and from my mom really helps just add an incredible depth of flavor. It's an aromatic, and it really just creates a beautiful syrup for our Turkish baklava. So once I've stirred the ingredients together, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto either low or a medium simmer if you have a simmer setting. If not, low is fine. And I'm going to allow my syrup to cook. The whole process should take about 20 minutes for the syrup to thicken up and to just release all those amazing flavors from that lemon peel, from the juice of the lemon that we've added into the syrup, and to thicken up to the perfect consistency for our delicious baklava. So I like to put on a 20-minute timer when I start to cook my syrup, just to remind myself about how long it should take to thicken up. But remember, every stove is different. So all you're going to want to do is come over to your pot every 5 minutes or so, give it a little stir, make sure that it's simmering softly, and then once the 20 minutes have passed, you can turn off your stove, and you should have a thick, delicious, incredibly aromatic syrup. Now, the syrup will continue to thicken, so what we're going to do is take it off of the heat and let it sit, and leave those lemon peels in there, releasing those incredible flavors. And then now would be a good time to turn your oven on to 350 degrees and start preheating it, as we are going to start assembling our baklava. Syrup will have plenty of time to cool as we prepare our walnuts and our pistachios for our delicious baklava filling. So I'm going to be working on our walnuts first, and these walnuts do not come salted. So what I do is I just add them to my food processor, and I'm really great at eyeballing it. I pretty much know how much 2 cups of walnuts looks like once they've been processed, because remember, we're going to measure them out after we process them to know that we have 2 cups worth. But just, you can eyeball it for starters, and then once you've process them, then you can measure out 2 cups of them. So what I do is I put them in my food processor, and then I really just pulse for a few seconds. Look at how quickly they come together, because we don't want to over process, because we don't want a nut butter. After all, what we're looking for is just some small pieces of walnuts. So you see how quickly that happened? It just breaks them down in a matter of seconds. And now we just take them out of our food processor. See the size that we're looking for? They're not completely broken down. You still see some chunks, and then you measure them out to make sure that you have 2 cups. Now, I had 2 cups, and I had a little extra that I like to save for when I serve my baklava. I like to sprinkle a little bit of the nuts right on top. So now, this did not have any salt. My walnuts came unsalted, and I'm using unsalted butter, so I'm going to give it a little sprinkle of salt right on top of those nuts. And then I am going to also add my 2 tablespoons of sugar into the walnuts. And then I'm just going to combine the two with the walnuts just using a spoon and just bring them all together. It's very simple, but the flavors are so delicious. And when you add that flaky phyllo and you add that delicious syrup, this is really going to be such a flavorful, delicious dessert. So once you stir it all together, then you're pretty much done with your walnut mixture. So I rinsed out my food processor and dried it really well, and now I'm going to process my pistachios. So in this case, my pistachios come salted, so I won't be adding the salt the way I added it to my walnuts, because these, as you see, are already salted, so they won't need any added salt. So all you're going to do is add them to your food processor, and just like we did before, we are going to process them to make the pieces much smaller, and then instead of adding salt and sugar to these, I'm only going to be adding my 2 tablespoons of sugar. So just as we had done with the walnuts, we're just going to put our lid on, and then we're going to process just for a few seconds. It really comes together very, very quickly. You just pulse for a few seconds, and you'll notice that your pistachios break down and they look beautiful, and the scents are so amazing. So I measured out, as I did before, 2 cups just to make sure that I have the right amount of pistachios, and I left some separate that I will be using to just sprinkle on top of the pistachio baklava once I serve it. And here are my 2 tablespoons of sugar. Remember, I'm not adding salt because these already came salted, so they don't need the extra salt. So I'm going to just stir the sugar and pistachios together, and then my pistachio mixture is ready. I mean, really, this comes together so easily, and the flavors are so remarkable. I think people tend to be a little intimidated by making baklava, but it's really very easy to make. And working with phyllo, as long as you know what you're doing, which I'm going to show you very quickly what to do, is very simple, and it should not be intimidating at all. It's delicious and it's easy. So our syrup has had plenty of time to cool and thicken up, and you will see just how incredible it looks. I'm going to transfer it over into this liquid measuring cup because it's going to be much easier to drizzle on top of my baklava from there. And just look at how amazingly thick and just incredible it looks. Really, it is so tasty and thick. It's just incredible how delicious it is. So I'm going to just set it aside, and we are going to start assembling our baklava. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to open up my roll of phyllo dough. Remember, we're only going to need 1 for this particular recipe because normally you get about 18 sheets or so in 1 roll of these phyllo sheets, which is enough for this tray of Turkish baklava 2 ways. So what I do is I open the roll up, and you see that they're rolled up in a plastic. So I'm going to use that plastic and just leave it right there on my counter, and I'm going to gently roll open the sheets of my phyllo dough. And then on top of these sheets, in order to keep them from drying out as we work, I am going to cover them, and I am going to do so with 2 different things. Now, we're going to need plastic wrap because the plastic wrap will keep the phyllo sheets nice and moist. But on top of the plastic wrap, I'm going to place a wet kitchen towel that I ran under the faucet and then I squeezed out, and then I put it right on top of that plastic wrap, and that way my phyllo sheets will stay nice and fresh and they will not dry out as I work. And you will notice that I placed them right here next to my tray because I want to have them accessible. All I do is lift the plastic wrap and the moist kitchen towel, and then I have access to the sheets as I layer my delicious Turkish baklava 2 ways in 1 tray. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to melt my butter. So what I do is I just use a microwave safe bowl, and I add my butter sticks right into that bowl, and then I just melt the butter in the microwave. This should take no more than a minute or so, and what I like to do is I place a sheet of paper towel on top of the bowl, and that way it won't splatter and make a mess in my microwave. Now once the butter is melted, then I'm going to use my pastry brush. I'm going to give it all a little stir. And then I'm going to brush the bottom and the sides of the tray with this delicious melted butter. Phyllo sheets will absorb this amazing butter, and together with the nuts and the syrup, it just creates the most amazing flavor. So butter plays a very important role in baklava, as in most recipes that use phyllo. We always use either butter or oil with phyllo sheets to make sure that they absorb all that yumminess, and it just creates the perfect texture and the perfect flavor. So what I did was I buttered the bottom and sides, and I'm going to start layering. So ideally, we're looking to make one layer at the bottom, then some nuts, then another layer of phyllo, and then some more nuts, and then top it off again with phyllo on top. So I started off here with 2 sheets of phyllo dough at the bottom, but what I'm going to create is 3 different layers. So this particular layer of phyllo sheets will have either 6 or 7, then the nuts, then another layer that has 6 or 7 phyllo sheets, then the nuts, and then whatever you have left goes on top, which depending on how many you used in your first 2 layers, it could be 4 or 6 sheets. So in other words, you could do 6 sheets layered with butter, then the nuts, another 6 sheets, then the nuts, and finish off with 6 more for your 18 sheets. Or as I am doing, I'm going to be doing 7 sheets, my nuts, then 7 sheets, more nuts, and then I'm going to finish it off with 4 sheets on top. I tend to like a lighter layer of sheets on top than the one in the bottom and in the middle layer. So I usually go with 4 for my top layer, but however you do it, it doesn't matter. The idea is we're going to use those 18 sheets, and every time we add a sheet or 2, we add some more butter. It's just really important to add the butter and to just brush it all around to moisten up those beautiful sheets of phyllo dough. So now I've added my 7 sheets of phyllo dough, and I've brushed them with plenty of butter. Every sheet or 2 gets another brushing of this delicious butter. And then I cover, of course, the remaining sheets as I work so that they don't dry out. And then once I've created that bottom layer, now it's time to add our nuts. So remember, we're doing 2 ways in one tray. So what I like to do is I like to visually decide where my center is, and half of it will be walnut and half will be pistachio. So you just grab your bowl with your walnut mixture and a serving spoon, and then you just sprinkle on that walnut mixture right on top of that layer of buttered phyllo sheets. Now we're going to be using half of the amount that we have in the bowl because we will be creating another layer of nuts. So you don't want to use all of it on this first layer. You're going to use half of it. And I'm keeping the walnuts on the left side of my tray because you guessed it, on the right side of my tray, I'm going to be using pistachios because all of the rest of the ingredients are the same in Turkish baklava, whether it be walnut or pistachio. The ingredients are the same, the layering is the same, we use the butter, we use the phyllo, everything is the same, even the syrup is the same. What varies is the type of nut. So in this case, we're using walnut on one side, pistachio on the other. That's why it works so well in one tray, and you can get 2 flavors from one dessert. So I did my half in walnut, and you guessed it, now we're going to do our other half. The right side of the tray we're going to do in pistachio, and it will have a different flavor even though we're using the same phyllo and butter. Just changing the type of nut that we're using really creates a different flavor to your Turkish baklava. And there's always a debate as to what we prefer. Do you want walnut or do you want pistachio? Well, this way you get to have them both. And it's funny because I sometimes go out to dinner with friends, and when we order baklava for dessert, there's always that debate. Ooh, what should we get? Walnut, pistachio? And we usually end up getting a piece of both flavors because really we love them both, but they are different from each other. So in this case, you get to try both flavors in one tray. It's a whole lot of fun, and it's like having two desserts in one. So remember, we're using half of the pistachio mixture, not the whole thing, because we will be creating another layer, and we need the other half for that second layer. So now, once you've added about half of your walnuts and half of your pistachios, it's time to create our second layer of phyllo sheets. And we are going to do exactly what we did the first time. We're going to add our sheets and we are going to brush them with our melted butter. And remember, I used 7 at the bottom and I'm going to use 7 on my next layer, but you can use 6 if you'd like. Whatever you choose to do is fine. The only thing is you're going to be a little more gentle because of course you have the nuts underneath. And so you're just going to make sure you get plenty of butter on your sheets, and you're just going to add 1 or 2 of them at a time, and then just gently use your pastry brush to spread that butter out over your sheets. So once you've created that second layer of buttered phyllo, then it's time to add the rest of our nuts on top. So what I do is I cover the rest of my phyllo sheets, and then I grab my bowls and I am going to do the same thing I did in the beginning. I'm going to add my walnuts to the left side of my tray, and then I will add my pistachios on the right. But this time I'm going to finish whatever I have left in my bowl because this is my second layer of nuts, and so I'm going to use the rest of the nuts for this layer. So now finally you're going to top your nuts with your third and final layer of phyllo sheets. Now, if you did 6 and 6, then you'll do 6 more. If you did 7 and 7, then you'll do 4 more for a total of 18 phyllo sheets in this dessert. And you do the same thing. You just add them on top, butter them, add another, butter it, and then you are done. Just make sure you complete your top layer and just add plenty of butter on top. Now in my case, I had thawed and opened both rolls of phyllo sheets, so I'm just going to use that plastic, just leave it right on top, and I'm just going to roll it up, and I'm going to put the rest of it in the refrigerator as I will be using that second roll of phyllo sheets to make something delicious later today. So I'm just going to roll it up, put it in a Ziploc bag, take the air out, and then I'm just going to store it in my refrigerator, and you can use it later or you can use it the next day. Just make sure to use it within the next day or two. So now it is ready and it is looking beautiful and it is going into the oven. So our oven is hot, and just place it on a center rack and set a 45-minute timer to allow it to cook. But about halfway through that cooking time, you're going to want to add a loose sheet of aluminum foil on top. And then after 45 minutes, you're going to bring it out, and it looks incredible, and it's flaky, and it's buttery, and it's absolutely delicious, and it smells incredible, and the kitchen is just full of those delicious aromas. And now look at the syrup, how thick it's become. You're just going to remove those 2 little pieces of lemon peel that have been sitting in there as incredible aromatics, giving this syrup this delicious depth of flavor. And then you're going to take the syrup, which is cool, and you're going to pour it over the hot baklava. The trick is one needs to be cool while the other is hot. So if your baklava cooled down and you didn't get a chance to put the syrup on top, then you would have to warm the syrup before you pour it on top, because the trick to keeping the baklava flaky and having that phyllo dough not become mushy is that one of the two needs to be hot. So in this case, my baklava is hot and my syrup is cool. So it doesn't matter which one, but one needs to be hot while the other is cool. And then I just poured that entire syrup on top, and you are going to see how this delicious baklava starts to absorb that incredible syrup. Just look at it bubbling in the corner with that flaky phyllo dough filled with butter and those nuts running throughout. And then the addition of this incredible syrup really, really makes this dessert special. So of course we have two flavors in one. So I'm going to try to find my center, and I'm going to run a knife down the center, because baklava traditionally we cut it diagonally and we kind of make some diamond shapes as we cut. But since I have two flavors going on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it down the center to separate those two flavors, and then I'm going to cut diagonally to portion my delicious baklava. But this way I have two separate flavors, both of them cut diagonally, one on the right and one on the left. And then of course you cut in one direction, and then all you do is cut in the opposite direction to then create those traditional diamond pieces of baklava. Now, once you cut your entire tray, your baklava is ready for serving and looks incredible, and it smells so, so good. And you have your two different flavors. You see the one on the right looks a little bit darker than the one on the left because it has that pistachio filling versus walnut on the left. Both are delicious, both are incredibly yummy, and both were made in the same tray. We have two different flavors in the same tray. So we have two desserts in one, and we can try both flavors to see which one we like best. Now look at how amazingly delicious these look. Pistachio or walnut, they both look incredible. And as I said earlier, I saved a little bit of those nuts because when I serve my baklava, I like to give my baklava a little sprinkle of those nuts right on top as I serve it, just to finish it off. And this of course is completely optional, but it just looks really pretty when serving a piece, or in this case, two pieces of baklava. And it tells the person which flavor they are getting. Of course, pistachio being on the right and walnut on the left. Both look incredible. And look at how syrupy they look. And as the baklava sits, it will absorb all of that syrup. You are not going to believe it, but as it cools, it will absorb every last drop of that syrup. It's just going to suck it all in, and it's going to make it incredibly flavorful and flaky and buttery and sweet and nutty and just absolutely delicious. And how much fun is it that we got two different desserts in one? And the best part is I get to sample both flavors. That is the best part of filming these videos for you, is that I get to try them. And then of course I share them with my loved ones, and everyone appreciates them and loves them. So I'm going to start with the walnut, which between you and me, I will tell you, is my personal favorite. Now it's falling apart because it is still warm. I have not given it a chance to set as I should. I just could not wait to try it, but I promise you it will set up as it cools. I'm going to taste it now though, while it's still warm. So yummy. Oh my, those delicious walnuts enveloped in that flaky phyllo and that incredible syrup, just so tasty. My goodness, as I said, this one is my personal favorite. I absolutely love it. Super yummy. I need to have a little bite. Super good, super tasty, just the perfect consistency. Yummy. Now, of course, I will taste the pistachio because even though it's not my favorite, I still absolutely love it because it's also delicious. They're both really tasty. But of course, we each have our preference, and this way we get to serve both flavors in one. And as I said, it's only falling apart because it's still warm. It will set once it absorbs all of that delicious syrup, and it will definitely hold its shape better as you serve it and as you eat it. So good. Just as tasty, really. It's a close runner-up. Just as good, just as yummy, buttery, flaky, delicious. Both of them. Amazing. So how incredibly delicious does this baklava look? It is so yummy, no matter which side you choose, walnut or pistachio, or of course, try both. They're really super, super yummy. And although we've made them in the same tray, they each have a distinct flavor because the walnut definitely carries its own flavor, as does the pistachio. But they both have one thing in common. They have those amazing flaky phyllo sheets that were layered in butter, and of course that thick, rich nut filling drenched in that amazing syrup that we put together. They smell incredible, they taste incredible, and honestly, they're both absolutely delicious. The tricky part is going to be deciding which of the two flavors you like best. The best thing about preparing baklava this way is that you have both choices right there in one tray. They're both absolutely delicious. Trust me. No, better yet, don't trust me. You're gonna have to try to make this recipe yourself. And of course, if you've enjoyed today's recipe, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Thank you so much for sharing my videos. I really appreciate it. And of course, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and to touch that little notification bell so that you get notified every time I put up a new delicious recipe, which I do very often, so you don't want to miss out. And of course, if you're not already following me on social media, be sure to follow Sally That Girl in the Kitchen on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest, and Sally That Girl FL on Twitter, Snapchat, and TikTok. See you next time. Sally That Girl in the Kitchen.